Welcome to another episode of the Lightspeed Investing Podcast. Today we got Jeffrey Spielberg here. He said no to a seven-figure offer so he can say yes to mastering the art and science of a liquidity event. And because he did that, 2 years later, he was able to accept a nine-figure offer for his e-learning company, EmberNet. Today, as CEO of Deep Wealth, Jeffrey pays it forward by helping you grow your business. See, Jeffrey's journey from hardship to triumph isn't merely inspiring, it serves as a practical guide for listeners aiming to mirror his business achievements through his candid sharings that resonates deeply and relevance to a community of entrepreneurs looking to transform their business outlook. Jeff, how are you doing today?
Hey, Philip, thanks so much for having me here. Absolute pleasure and an honor. I'm terrific. Thank you for asking. How about yourself?
I'm great, man. So, where are you based out of? Just so the audience knows.
That's a great question. We're talking about that offline. It really depends on the time of year or the day of the week. I bounce between, I'm going to say Miami, Florida. It's really Hollywood, Florida, but we'll call it Miami. It's just a little bit easier. More people know that. So it's the other Hollywood, otherwise known as Miami. And if I'm not there, I'm in Toronto, Canada. So talk about two very different weather and systems and everything else. Today, I happen to be in Toronto. Just got back from Miami.
I love it. And it's funny because I'm going to be on a plane to Miami for the entirety of next week as I'll be attending the 10X GrowthCon 2024.
Love it. Yeah. You know what? When I'm in town and see the conference and all the people that are there, it just takes on a buzz and a vibrancy. You're going to love it. Really excited
Right.
for you, Philip.
Yeah, dude, I'm super excited too. I love being in a room with high caliber people wanting to
Yeah.
grow and wanting to do more, which
Yeah.
leads us back to this podcast today, Jeff. You've got a pretty incredible story here, and we'd love to just kind of share with the listeners because oftentimes, you hear about people when they have achieved success, right? But you don't necessarily see what obstacles and adversity they had to overcome to get there. So if you want to give a high level overview of how you got to where you are now, and then that we can start going in the specific details, right, of your journey. We'd love to cover that today with you.
Absolutely, Philip. And before I get into that, for the listeners, really what I want them to listen to are different themes, a little bit of a heads up or perhaps a little bit of a spoiler alert for them as I'm going through that. One of the things that I didn't do, because oftentimes failure is the best teacher. I mean, if we're all successful, it's easy to learn from success. Things are going great, things are going our way, not much to talk about. We're smiling. When things don't work out, when people quit, perhaps too early, or perhaps they stay too long and they should have quit earlier, we can talk about that. I learned so much from failure and I didn't do so many things that I should have done. Hindsight's always 2020. And Phil, for the listeners, I presume they're coming to this podcast either because they're already in the community and they're benefiting from what you're doing and your systems and how you're helping them, or they're thinking about doing that, learning and really jumping over that whole learning curve that they can start making some money with your systems a whole lot quicker, a whole lot less painful in terms of doing that. And mentorship, coaching, I didn't do that as much as I should have. So whoever's listening to the podcast now, a really heartfelt welcome to you. The fact that you're listening to this podcast, you're listening to Philip and his coaching and his mentorship, you're really doing so many things right. It's saving you more heartache and hassle than you know. And that's really a great segue into my background because Philip, people read about me today or they see me today and they see the success that's there. And I got to tell you, if I had, it's that old saying, if I had $1 for every mistake I made, believe me, I would not have needed that nine-figure exit to get to where I got to. I would have been so much beyond that from all the mistakes that I made. So you're not speaking to someone who just showed up, things started working. I was more of a failure than a success going through it. In fact, people around me would often have a betting pool. When's Jeffrey going to quit? Or when's he finally going to just flame out and burn out because I was making so many mistakes? I was really the underdog all the way through.
Wow.
And part of that, I came from a family of entrepreneurs, Philip, very successful entrepreneurs. In particular, my father, my father's brother, my uncle, they were my mentors, and they really set a high standard, a high bar for me. And watching them growing up and being around them growing up, I said to myself, I want to go on my own. I could have gone into the family businesses and really gone down that path, but I said, you know what? I will never know what I could do. I want to either dig that hole and bury myself or climb out of that hole on my own, but knowing that I had done it. And so I always knew very early on when I was 6, 7 years old that one day I would be in business. I had no idea what that would be at the time, but I knew I would be an entrepreneur. And along that ways, growing up in high school, I became part of a MLM system, and that taught me how to tell stories, how to present, what rejection is like. And believe me, back then, Philip, I was the worst presenter. I would get up, and there were family and friends. I knew them all when I was selling actually water purifiers at the time. I would get up there, I'd be sweating, and sweat would be pouring down my face. I'd be so nervous, but it was a learning experience. And then from there, I started to create companies. One of them was a video production company. And with another friend, we would film local parties around town or did some corporate events that my father had hooked us up with to get into these companies to start doing that, and slowly began the entrepreneurial journey. Where things began, though, it was right out of school. I had no money, I had no experience, I had no team. Literally living out of my parents' attic. I just graduated from my MBA program. I saw my friends signing these very lucrative contracts. They were getting house bonuses, car bonuses, vacation trips. And here's Jeffrey living in his parents' attic, nothing to show for it. And I hung a shingle out the door and I began the e learning company, EmberNet. So this was when the internet was just coming out. It wasn't broadband like we have today. In fact, it wasn't even the internet. It was the World Wide Web. It was these clunky dial-up modems, very slow. You'd have to phone up to the internet provider. I'll bring some names from the past. It was perhaps CompuServe or America Online or some of the others like that to get access to the internet. And it was this modem that tied up the phone line. So you're on the internet, you couldn't speak to anyone else. Your phone line was busy. It would take minutes to load pages. There really wasn't a lot out there. But I did a bet the farm decision.
Mm.
The truth is, and here's the first lesson that I learned very early on, Philip, it's resilience trumps resources. So what do I mean by that? Resilience trumps resources. And what that means is people ask, well, Jeffrey, as successful as EmberNet was, you bootstrapped it. So you didn't go to venture capital, you didn't get any private equity, it was all your money. Didn't that slow you down? Yes, it slowed me down. Didn't that hold you back from growing and doing other kinds of initiatives? Yes, it did. Well, what would EmberNet have been like if you would have received millions of dollars? And the answer, and people fall off their chairs or they pick themselves up the ground when I answer it, EmberNet would have failed. We would not have had a 9-figure deal. I said, wait a minute, you didn't have any money. You shouldn't have been successful, but you became successful. And you're telling me that if you did have money at the beginning, you probably would have failed. We never would have heard of you. You wouldn't have been a success.
Mm-hmm.
And the answer is yes. And it goes back to, well, why? What's the why and the how behind that?
Right.
And one of the cardinal rules with being an entrepreneur, at least in my experience, when we don't have the ability to write the check, or even if we could write the check, it doesn't mean that we should. We have to get creative. And so one of the resilient things that we had to do very early days, myself and my business partner in the company, we wanted to make it accessible. So we were working at the time with business schools. Later on, it was distance education programs, continuing education programs. We had to make the service accessible.
Mm-hmm.
So one choice was we have modems in different cities across North America, or we have 1-800 numbers that people can dial, but it was very expensive. Couldn't afford it, could not write the check, couldn't have these racks and racks of modems and gazillion phone lines for people to call into. So we made a bet the farm decision on this new thing called the internet. People thought it was a fad, it wouldn't be around.
Wow.
But we said, you know what? The internet, it's early right now. The early adopters, they'll get their own internet subscription. We won't have to have all these other phone lines. We'll let the other service providers, they'll figure that out. It's not our headache. We're going to focus on what we do really best. So one of the things from resilience, we decided we'll let other people take care of the technology with the modems. We took that a step further. I'm not a programmer. I don't know how to code. I'm a really good end user, though, of software. I understand it. I can customize it. I can do all those things. We didn't have the money to create the software, to create the technology, to create the system. So we licensed it. We originally started with one company. And then before you knew it, we licensed all the popular learning management systems at the time. So we're like the Switzerland out there. Pick whatever flavor you want, but you're getting the EmberNet flavor with our world-class service and our way of doing things that got the best results. So resilience is what made the difference. Now, let me imagine a future that never happened. Go back in the day, Philip. We have private equity behind us, venture capital behind us. We have millions of dollars. Jeffrey, you should write your own software. Great idea. Let's hire some programmers. Let's write our own software. Jeffrey, you should set up rooms of modems and phone lines. Great idea. Let's start doing that. It would have been a distraction. So I imagine just like people are coming to you, they want to start trading. They don't want to take decades to figure out how to master it. They want to start doing it in days, perhaps weeks at the most. Well, they're going to come to you. You've already paved the way for that. That's resilience. That's being smart. That's saying, I don't have to know everything. Let me learn from the best of the best. Let me learn only what I need to know, not what I don't need to know. Similar kind of thing there. And so resilience really paved the way. And I can tell stories upon stories of how that made the difference, but I'm going to put a pause on that there and throw it back to you and ask you, did I begin to answer your question in terms of some of the early days and the resilience that really made the difference of what sculpted and molded EmberNet to eventually become that company that creates a market disruption?
Well, no, absolutely. Thanks so much for asking me that. And from a high level overview, it definitely makes sense, and I'm totally in with you. Because what you really opted to do is take things on under your own control, right? As opposed to looking for help in the early days and really grinding it out to see how far you can take it. Do you have any specific examples of sleepless nights and the reasons for those sleepless nights, and how you approach that situation so that it allowed you to continue to look forward to the future without being too devastated?
Absolutely. There were too many sleepless nights, Philip. And at the time, again, I didn't know what I didn't know. And that's why I started off our conversation with the importance, the value of coaching, of mentorship. I didn't really have that because I just jumped in feet first, for better or for worse. Look, it turned out all right for me. There was a lot of sleepless nights along the way. Sleepless nights from always looking over our shoulder. We were the early adopters, we were the pioneers, but the marketplace is catching up. Is someone going to surpass us? Is the marketplace going to have us obsolete? Where do we find the world's best talent to help join the team, take the company to the next level? How do we continue to innovate and be one step ahead? Sleepless nights of how are we going to afford all this? The company's growing, the company's successful, but how do we fund that success? That's where the bootstrapping, and we had to make some really tough decisions, even into sleepless nights of, yes, we've had a successful run, something's changed in the marketplace. Today, I use two fancy words. We call them inflection points. Some people call them blind spots. We talk all about that in Deep Wealth Mastery, but that's another conversation for another time. There got a point in the business where the business was really successful, but, and it's a big one, had we not done anything, if we just did the easy thing, which often isn't the right thing, and we just did nothing, hey, things are working, we're profitable, look at this, we're growing like crazy, why change anything? We would have been out of business. Thank goodness some of those sleepless nights had us realize, okay, what's the next big problem that we can solve for our existing client base? And learned what that was. And that really paved the way that we can put ourselves out of business and into a bigger business. Had we not done that, Philip, there would not have been a 9-figure deal. There may not have even been a company. The company would have gone flat, or it would have gone out of business from losing money as successful as it was. And so one of the sleepless nights for every business owner, just like it is, Philip, I'm sure in trading with what you're doing, things work until they don't. Now, what do you do? And I'm sure in your community, hey guys, this stops working, but we've been behind the scenes trying all these new different tactics and strategies. Here's what you should be trying. Here's what you should be doing. Philip, wow, I wish I had that. I didn't have that back in the day. I had to figure it out on my own. It was a lot of sleepless nights, but that's one of the huge things of, okay, when things stop working, because they always will, it's not a matter of if, when, okay, how are you going to respond to that? What are you going to do with that? So many, many sleepless nights along the way.
Wow. So, do you mind getting a bit more specific with like the actual situation that you were talking about, where you said, hey, the company is growing, but you decided to take another direction, right? Which
Sure.
most people would not have. Like, what was that situation that you're referring to?
Wow, great question, Philip. I mean, my goodness, that question that could be several episodes, but let me do my best to condense it into
Okay.
the quick summary. So EmberNet, let's call it EmberNet One. EmberNet One, the original company, started off as keeping the seats filled. What do I mean by that? In online education, today we call it e-learning. It wasn't called e-learning back then. It was called online education. I
Okay.
want you to picture this. Imagine you're a business. Out of every 10 new customers that you get, you lose between 6 to 8 of those customers. You're going to be out of business pretty soon.
Yeah.
Well, that's what it was like in e-learning. these university programs. They would go into online learning. They would get online learning students, but the students would drop out. Why were the students dropping out? Well, it may be the technology was too hard. It may be the course really wasn't designed all that well. They didn't get answers to questions that they needed in a timely manner. So when we came in, we took those dropout rates from 60 to 80% and we reduced them to less than 10%. So now think about that. Out of every 10 students, 9 of them are now completing the course. That's what we brought to the table. How do we do that? We hosted the courses on our servers. We monitor those servers 24/7. At a typical university, if a server went down back in the day, it may stay down over the weekend until the IT department came back in on the Monday. So imagine you're an online learner, you only have so much time to access the course, you're trying to access the course, it's down all weekend. It's frustrating. Eventually, you're going to give up. Or you have a question, you call into the IT department, they don't get back to you, or you email them, they don't get back to you, you're on the phone for, holding for hours and hours. We had 24/7 live technical support. Anytime that you called in, you spoke to someone. When you emailed, you got an instant answer back. Or you're a professor, you're trying to figure out how you build the course. We built courses. So it was a done for you solution. And in the early days, it worked really well. We took very expensive technology, we made it easy. We took those costs and we disseminated or broke it across all the different clients that it was very affordable for them and so highly profitable for us. But then, as you know, with technology, nothing stays the same. The technology started to become easier. More e-learning programs started to get out there. IT departments started to catch up to us. And so that was the challenge for us. If we did nothing, as good as we were, sometimes good enough is all a customer wants. Yeah, EmberNet, you're terrific. You're amazing. But my IT department is good enough and it's free for me. I don't need to use your services anymore because good enough for me is that's all it's going to take. I'm not going to have to write you the check. And that's another valuable lesson. Sometimes customers don't appreciate what we really do for them until they go a different way and then it's too late. And so that's what we call the inflection point, where filling the seats, or rather keeping the seats filled, was no longer enough. And one of the, I stumbled into it. I'm going to call it dumb luck. I remember one of my mentors always said, Jeffrey, I'd always rather be lucky than smart. And I was lucky. When I was on with my clients, I would just always ask, hey, Philip, how are you today? By the way, anything keeping you up at night? Philip, you asked me that question. It's a great question, but that's one of the questions I would ask my clients. What's keeping you up at night? And I'll never forget. It was John Clark, the Associate Dean of Colorado State University. He says, Jeffrey, I'm glad you asked me that question. I have a board meeting after our call, actually, and I have to go in front of the board and tell them why our enrollments are down, why we're not going to have as many students. The program is not going to be as profitable. You got this thing called the internet that's nipping away at my students, my competition through video conferencing. They're also setting up locally in town. Do you think you can help me? And being the cocky young entrepreneur guy that I was at the time, yeah, John, no problem. Give me 2 or 3 weeks. Philip, it took 2 or 3 years. But yeah, give me 2 or 3 weeks and I'll have the solution for you. And we didn't do marketing at the time. We did marketing for ourselves, but never for our clients. The more I looked into it, the more I realized why he was having problems. Marketing isn't a new concept, but marketing for very prestigious programs at highly ranked universities, tier one institutions, that really wasn't done out there. And their reputation's everything. And a lot of the marketing companies didn't understand that. And so it took us a while, but we figured that out. And so EmberNet 2 came into existence. And EmberNet 2 was not only keeping the seats filled with students, but filling the seats in the first place, where we did all the marketing now on behalf of the institution, the university, behalf of the program. We took all the courses, we put them online, we trained the faculty, we brought in small group instructors, we handled everything. So the university didn't do anything except graduate the students. They owned the content. We got all that out there. We did all the marketing, and they began to have massive, massive success. Some of the largest programs in the country. The learning results, the learning outcomes were as good, if not better. They were getting incredible alumni, millions of dollars going their way from what they wouldn't have been able to do otherwise. We changed our business model along the way. We created a market disruption, and it all came from one question. We call that question step 2, an X factor. I'm getting way ahead of myself in our 9-step roadmap, but the X factor is, hey, what's keeping you up at night? And it's really understanding what's your client's problem today, not yesterday, not last week, not last year. What's the new problem today? I may not be doing it, but if I could solve it today, can that give me a new lease of life that I can be in business tomorrow and the day beyond? And that's really what set things up for a massive success. Had we not done that, Philip, again, EmberNet 1 would have flattened out or eventually gone out of business.
Right. So if I'm hearing you correctly, right, we basically had this e-learning platform, and by getting additional answers, from your existing clients, you were able to add a marketing aspect, right, from in terms of your service and deliverables, right, to help you be a standout in your marketplace. Is that correct?
Exactly. And you know what? I'll make it even simpler. It's like what you're doing with Lightspeed Investing.
Hmm.
So, as an individual, I can, on my own, without going to Lightspeed Investing, I can do my best to try and invest. I could read the books and the biographies of some of the most successful investors that are around. I can try things out. I'll likely lose my money. It'll be very painful. It won't be fun. It'll take a lot of time. Or instead, I can come to Lightspeed Investing. You guys have figured it out. You've put together the system. You're going to tell me exactly what to do, what not to do. You're going to show me how to do it. You're going to have these live sessions where I'm now a part of that. So it's really a done for you system that I can put my own personal touch on. And
Hmm.
that's exactly what we were doing for the universities, where they already had these programs that were not online, they're on the ground,
Right.
traditional programs. And we then took that to new marketplaces where they weren't before with our system. We knew how to do everything. They didn't have to figure it out on their own. Their IT department never would have been there. Their marketing department never would have been there. Like what you're doing with Lightspeed, we're doing the same thing for the universities, and we gave them quick access to success. When all was said and done, it was huge for them.
That makes a lot of sense, and thank you so much for allowing the audience to see, how your days actually develop, into where you are now. Now, something that keeps brewing in the back of my mind is, well, Jeffrey, what inspired you, right, in terms of the impetus, that actually gave you the idea to do something like this? You talk about how you come from a family of entrepreneurs, you graduated as an MBA, watching all your other friends, maybe get a stable 9 to 5 job, get a company car, house, whatever. So, like for you, why did you decide to venture and create your own thing, and specifically with the business model that you crafted?
Absolutely. Let me go back to how we started the conversation, where I said I made more mistakes in the beginning than I had successes.
But
And in the beginning, from that pressure of being in an entrepreneurial family, I
mhm,
made the wrong choice. I'm going to tell you what not to do in life. And don't do what Jeffrey did early in life. I wanted to be rich, Philip. I'm just going to put it out there. I wanted to be rich. I wanted to be successful, to prove to myself that I had what it takes. The
sure.
wrong motivation. I now know, and I tell this to my family, to my children, hey, don't ever chase the money. Chase the passion, and the money will chase you. I
Mhm.
wasn't smart enough to understand that. So here's Jeffrey going into pre-dentistry. Why did Jeffrey want to become a dentist in the beginning? Was it because Jeffrey just loved the field of dentistry, wanted to contribute to it and make a difference? No. Jeffrey knew that dentists did well, and many of them were rich and had a great lifestyle, and Jeffrey wanted to do the same. The most miserable time of my life, I failed courses. Some of the teachers, I remember my chemistry teacher, they passed me out of empathy. It was a pure empathy pass. I shouldn't have passed, but they saw me coming in, working the labs, coming in for extra help. I was working all night. I was always asking questions, going in for the tutoring, everything else. I was still failing. They just passed me out of empathy. I didn't deserve it, but they gave it to me anyways. My first year of university, I was a washout. Thankfully, I changed. I went into business. I never looked back. And it taught me a valuable lesson. Go with the strengths. So often in society, we're told, Jeffrey, you did 9 things really well, but there's one thing you failed in. I want you to focus on that one thing and become really good at it. Wrong advice. It's a mistake.
Right.
It should be, Jeffrey, you did these 9 things really well. That one thing that you didn't do so well in, forget about it. Find other people that can do it, that can help you with it. Don't ever focus on that. These 9 things, figure out how to do that even better. Valuable lesson. And so I went into business. And what I learned about myself, I love helping people first and foremost. I love education and I love technology. And when you take the intersection of those 3 things, helping people, education, technology, that was EmberNet. I didn't know it at the time, but that's what EmberNet was doing.
Mhm.
We were helping everyone from, let's say, the CEO of a Fortune 10 company to a stay at home mom to high ranking government officials and everyone else in between to further their education, make their community better, make the workplace better, change society one e-learner at a time. That's what EmberNet was doing. And once I tapped into that, Literally, you could have paid me to do that. I was paying myself to do it because the early years we weren't making money. I was paying myself to do it. I was writing the check for myself to do that. It wasn't profitable, but I loved it so much. And that's why I got into EmberNet. I was in my MBA program. We were in a work group. We were meeting on the weekends, the weeknights. It was a miserable time. I wasn't having fun. This is the first few months. People were thinking of dropping out of the program. I said, my goodness, there's got to be a better way. This is not the way to do it. And that's when I said, okay, Jeffrey, look, you're a technology geek. You love helping people. You're in this educational program. Figure out a way. And that's where I didn't know it was EmberNet at the time, but I created this system for my work group. Philip, we went from the worst group to the best group.
Wow, I see.
I felt so bad that the next semester I shared it with the entire program and it took off like wildfire. They started using it. And that's where I said at the end, you know what? If it helped this business program, why can't it help other business programs? And that's when we began with business programs. We outgrew that marketplace, then went into continuing education, never looked back. But that's how it all began because I channeled into my passion, helping people, helping solve their problem first. If you help enough people solve their problem, you'll eventually solve your problem. And, as we're talking about this, I'm thinking of you, I'm thinking of your community, people that are learning the Lightspeed investing way. I can only imagine because of Deep Wealth, and I'm getting ahead of myself, but I can only imagine the money that your community is making. They can set up foundations. They can really take and make a difference with a social cause and put their earnings or profits towards that after they take care of themselves or family. It's a wonderful way to live life where you can take your success, pay it forward, and make a difference.
Right. Absolutely. I'm totally with that. And, there's so much valuable insights there. But Jeff, I think one of the burning questions when someone hears, your explanation of your origin story is, how are you able to basically suck it up and keep going when you're writing yourself that paycheck and you're not even in profit, right? Like, how were you able to continue to live, if you were not profitable? And what made you to have the resilience to go, no, let me keep doing this thing, even though it's not profitable right now, I know it's going to turn around later.
Great question. And early days, it's a question that myself, business partners, we ask all the time. And you answered that in part, Philip. You talked about resilience. It's a resilience to go forward. And earlier I said, don't chase the money. Why don't you chase the money? If I was just chasing the money, I would have given up well before EmberNet ever became successful. Oh, look at this. This is not working out. Why am I doing this? I'm miserable. This doesn't feel right. Let me go do something else. I was chasing the passion. I was so passionate about this. First, my goal was, can we get 1,000 learners? Once we got to 1,000, can we get to 5,000? We got to 5,000. Can we get to 10,000? 100,000? Can we get to millions? It was that passion that kept it going. But it wasn't easy. There were sacrifices. The first year, eating at my parents' house, doing my laundry at my parents' house because didn't have the money to do it on my own.
Right.
You make sacrifices to do it, but I didn't care. I was so passionate about what I was doing. I always knew I would find a way where there seemed no way.
Yeah.
And for most successful people, that's just how it is. If it was easy, everyone would do it. It's for the ones that persist.
That's right.
Well, today didn't work out. Tomorrow's a new day. Let's see what tomorrow brings. What new insights can I do tomorrow? What can I do differently tomorrow that I didn't do today that can make the difference? And that's really what helps get through the very difficult times. And, truth be told, Philip, it was so difficult. Some of that I don't even remember. People, family members will tell me stories. Really? That happened? I blacked it out. It was
That's
not
so
easy.
funny.
Not going to lie here. It's not easy,
Yeah.
but it was worth it because here's one of my beliefs. Our future success is waiting for us. We're not ready for our future success. Those challenging times, they sculpt us, they mold us, just like a diamond. A diamond comes from compression, lots of pressure over eons that it becomes a diamond. Same thing with us. It's those challenging times, those so-called failures. That's what forms us and sculpts us that we become ready for our future self.
I could not agree more. And thank you so much for being on today. My last question to you is, so at that time, right, you were a struggling student, graduate student, how did you structure and organize your calendar? Obviously, you had your graduate courses, you had the business. Were you also working like part-time or full-time to support yourself? Like how did you, in a very tight graduate calendar, do all those things?
Great question. So before starting EmberNet, you're right, I was an MBA student. I created the system. The system, it's going to sound a little bit corny, Philip. I admit it. It's going to sound corny, but the system came from a place of love. I loved the system. Every waking hour was getting the system better, helping out my fellow students, making sure that they're happy and they're doing that. I won some scholarships along the way,
Mm.
and I used the money from the scholarships to pay for the equipment. When the program became successful, the dean pulled me into the office and said, "Okay, Jeffrey, you know what? This has become a huge success. We just can't have this out of your bedroom anymore. Can we help you with this?" And I said, "Well, you know what? Actually, you can. Why don't you start help with some of the costs, and we'll cover some more hardware. We'll make it more available. At that time, it was modem lines. We'll get some more phone lines all set up." And so then the school began to help with that. But in the beginning, it was all volunteering. I created a group in the MBA program, the technology group, and began to get members coming in to help with that. So it really became a life of its own because
Mm.
other people enjoyed it so much and made a difference in their life. They wanted to be a part of it.
Wow, that makes a lot of sense. And was this a school up in Canada or was it a school in Florida?
So at the time, it was the University of Toronto.
Oh, I see.
Today, it's the Rotman School of Business. Back in the day, it was the management school at the University of Toronto. That's where I was doing my MBA. And then from there, though, we really took the concept, developed there, and then started primarily in the US and never looked back.
Wow, that's amazing. Well, thank you so much for sharing your origin story. It's always fascinating to learn from successful entrepreneurs, not about how they got to where they are, but how the beginning looked like. Usually it's very messy and they kind of had to. Everyone that I speak to, right, there seems to be a pattern there, which is you got to figure it out, and it's always intriguing to look at how that unfolded. So, Jeffrey, super excited to do additional episodes with you where we will go into what the deep wealth concept it's about. Super happy to have learned about the beginnings of your journey and excited to hear more about what you got going.
Well, Phil, thank you so much. It's been an absolute pleasure and honor to be here with your community. Thank you.
Thanks. See you around.